there, it's Vicki McCarthy from Aussie Stampers. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to be working today with the skin tones on this quite large stamp here. And what I'm going to do is just push this up a little bit, and I'm going to start testing that they blend well together down here and that nothing's too dark or too light or seems to clash. So I'm going to start off with E000 right in the bottom corner. Just lay that colour down. I'm actually going to lay down quite a large piece of that because I like to lay down some basic colour first as my base, and then I blend over the top of that. This is E00 coming up now. I'm going to blend that over the top. That's a really nice close blend to that, so that's fine. Now we're going to come in with E11 or E11 over the top of that one. And that's still in the same range. It's blending nicely. It's quite a bit heavier, but that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that will give some contrast. Now I'm really going to come up to a much higher contrast. I'm going to come in for E33, which will give me some lovely dark shadows, and E34 for the darkest shadows of all. Now, if I didn't have E34, I would probably use E33 and just keep layering it over and over an extra time. But because I do have these two colours close to each other, right next door to each other, I'm going to use that slightly darker marker. But you could get away without that E34 if you wanted to. Now, for the blush tones, I'm going to bring in R20 or R20, which is a nice light blush tone. And RV13. Let's try it and see. I have a feeling it's going to be just too much. It's just a step too far here. That might be good for maybe the lips if I put some lipstick on her. So I'll keep that to the back maybe for the lipstick. So I won't be using that in the skin tones. But you can see there I've got my little palette already made, and I know that those tones, they're quite good. If I had something between these two, that would be great as well. But I'm only going to use these darker ones as the really intense shadows right at the back, and I'm going to blend over the top of them anyway, and I'll show you the tips for blending if you don't have markers that are right next to each other. So the first thing I like to do always is to start with a base. So I'm going to start with my E000 and lay down this colour. And I'm avoiding the eye because I want that to remain pure white. And I'm also going to avoid the lips at this point. I might come in and layer this on as a base coat when I'm ready to do the lips, but for now I'm just going to keep with all the skin tones. You can see I'm using a circular motion because it's quite a large area and I don't really want any streaky lines. When I start the blending, I'll be using more of a feathering stroke, but for now I just want a soft blend. And I'm also going to come down into her neck and to the back of her neck there. So it's pretty easy to see where the skin is defined in this. There's not really a whole lot of guesswork, just making sure there are no white spots showing through. And that's my first layer of E000. So 3 zeros on that one. Now I'm coming in with the E00, which is just the 2 zeros, and I'm going to start figuring out where the shadows are going to be. And what I'm going to do is come in and add some slightly darker colours and just keep building and building and building. I think where some people go wrong with Copic colouring is they try and get it done all in 1 or 2 hits, and you really need to come back and keep blending over and over and over again. So I'm figuring out where the shadows are. Now with this particular piece, the artist has already put some shading in, so I'm just going to go with what the artist has decided is going to be the darker space, with the shadows coming under the hair and under the flowers. And I think the light's also coming around onto the front as well, so the light's about here I think, and it's arcing around. From what I can tell how the artist has drawn this, because there are a lot of images on the front that are quite shaded. So I'm thinking the light is partly from the back and somewhat to the front as well. So with that in mind, we're now going to just do some shadows around the hairline, which is where shadows are always going to fall anyway, and into the ear and on the neck. So there's not a whole lot of shadow that is going to fall on this face. Most of the shading in this is going to be the hair and the floral pieces. So this is quite a good one to work with. I'm going to put some shading under the nostril. I'm going to put a little bit of shading around the eye, and I'm going to shade under the eyebrow and the eyelid. So you can see this is where my shading is coming in, and I also like to bring that down just a little bit so that it doesn't go up to a point. I'm going to put a little bit of shading at the base of the jaw here to blend into the ear, and I'm also going to put some shading under the mouth, under that bottom lip. And in the corner of the mouth too, I'm going to put a little bit of shade. So that's my first lot of shade coming in with the E00. Now I'm going to come in and darken those tones. So I'm going to bring in the next shade which I have, which is E11, and do the same thing again. I'm going to shade around the face, and I'm going to start flicking. I'm going to move those so that you can see how I do this. Very light strokes. Now what you want to do before you commit is to figure out what is a light stroke. So for me it's just very light. What is a heavy stroke? It's more like a flick. What's a medium stroke? A smaller flick. If you can work this out before you start laying the colour down, it's really going to be helpful. So I'm coming in with very light flicking around the edge of her hairline. And then the ear I'm just going to colour, because that ear I think will be quite dark. A bit along the jawline, it's very light feathery strokes. Underneath her chin is going to be much darker, so I'm going to colour that whole piece in. And then under the lips, in the corner of the mouth, under the nostril, and under the curve of the nose, under the eye, right up through the eyelid to the brow bone, and maybe just bring that down just a fraction there, because this is quite shadowed under here, so I'm going to actually bring that shading down a little bit more to match up with that shaded piece there. Alright, so that was E11. Now I'm going to come in with a much darker tone. I'm going to come in with my main shading colour for the darker tone, which is E34. Now this is really dark, so I'm just going to lay a small amount down with a feather motion. I'm going to flick out where it wants to blend into those other colours. You can see I've gone over the hair a little bit there. I'm not too concerned about that because the hair will be using E-tones as well anyway. Now into the ear I'm going to bring a darker section right there, and into the neck, same thing, quite dark there, dark right underneath. Flicking that down, dark under the mouth, into the corner of the mouth, into the nostril, behind that fold of skin on the nose, directly under the eyes, eyelid, under the brow bone. I'm going to leave a highlight there because the light will create a highlight on the brow bone, the rest will be shaded. And I'm going to come into her eyebrows as well because I don't want to give her black eyebrows. The eyebrows are going to be blonde. Okay, now there's the basis for the shading started. Now we're going to blend it all back again. I did have a darker colour here, which was the E34. That's the very darkest that I've used. So now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to go from dark to light again. So I'm going to pick the colour that is next, which is the E33, and I'm just going to blend. That's right, the E33. I'm just going to blend these again. I'm going to pull this colour out a little bit and just blend that in. And it looks quite vivid contrast at the moment. Don't worry about that. You'll find once you get this blended, that contrast is actually going to bring your drawing to life and give it some movement and some, what I like to call character in it, I guess. That it's not just a flat work of art, it's quite three-dimensional. So now we're coming back into the E11, the E11, and now you can see this will start to blend really, really well. So I'm feathering this back out again. You can see I'm bringing that back out around the face. And it's intensifying the shadow. It's also giving the effect that the shadow is a little bit more prominent. And now blending again back with E00. I'll just get the lid for that one. Here we go, E00. And now blending that out completely. So for this one, I'm blending it. And I'm going to do a complete colour everywhere except her nose, which will be lighter, front of her nose, the top of her lip, and an area on the chin, which I'll define as a bit of a circular shape because that's curved. I'm also going to leave a little bit on the cheeks. So these are going to be my lighter areas, and I'm going to go back in and just colour. And this marker is actually quite dry, so there's a few streaks going on, but I will work with that. It's not completely dry, so I'll have enough to give me some coverage, and I'll be doing some more blending in a minute anyway. So just blending that back, blending back, avoiding those areas, the front of the nose, the cheeks, that rounded area on the chin, where we're going to bring in some natural highlights, and that lip dip under the nose is going to be highlighted as well. I'm going to bring some darker in right there in the crease, just before your eye hits the eye socket. I'm going to keep that all blending, coming over that cheek area again. Okay, now I'm going to start some feathering. This is a very light colour, and it's very tempting to just want to colour it in like you would if you were in school, but I actually want to bring the feathering in now, and you'll see how this starts to really blend that colour into the colour before it. Now, there's no real system to this other than what works for me. I've seen some people work with light colour and then put the darkest colour on. I simply cannot work with that method because it brings in too strong a contrast, and then you've got to bring everything back to match that dark colour. I prefer to start light, go from light to dark, and then from dark back to light again, so that you've got a gradation in your colours. Now I'm going to just do a single little layer on that edge of the chin, and stay away from that now with more colouring, so that I know that that chin is highlighted. The same with the lip dip. I'm just going to colour around it, and the same with the nose. And then I'm just going to colour that back in with feathery strokes. And you can see how that's much more blended now. That's a much more blended look than the circles. The circles are great for filling in areas, but then you want to come into that that flicking motion, which I find is much better for blending. And I generally flick away from me. I find that it gives a finer edge. So that's why I'm turning the paper, so that I can get a nice fine edge on the flicking motion. Now you can see I'm working this and working this and working this, and this is the secret with Copic markers, that it's not something you can do quickly. You need to put some time aside and make sure that you're going to keep blending until you do have something that looks blended, rather than something that's going to look quite streaky or looks as though you've rushed what you're doing. And to just flick out from the eye there on a slightly darker version. This is the E00 I'm working with, so it's the second lightest colour. I'm going to do a slight shading on the top lip, but not a huge amount. I don't want to make it too dark. And then the neckline here. So you can see she's starting to take shape. Her face is starting to blend. It's starting to look like it's more rounded and has the shadows. So now I want to blend back from the next darkest colour, which will be, let's find him here, E11. And I'm just going to come back in with my very darkest and feather out from the darkest. So I'm just providing a feather stroke. I'm colouring in all that neck because that's all going to be quite dark under there. And what this does, it means that you don't have too much of a step between your darkest and your lightest colours. It's blending those dark towards the light. And I'm going to turn it. And it can be difficult to figure out how this is going to look while you're doing it because the ink dries much lighter. So when you're putting the ink down, it can look quite dark. But give it a minute and it will lighten up again as it dries, and you'll be realising, yes, I'm on the right track. Now I'm going to bring that 0, 0 back in and blend out the edges of that, again with the feathering strokes. And you can see already that the harsh line between those two colours has started to dissolve. And I'm keeping those lines in the face where the nostril goes round. So the flared part, not the nostril, but where the edge of the nose is, underneath, above the nostril, that's a rounded shape. So we're giving her some shape there and on the chin, and also in the corner of the mouth. So I'm just going to now do a coat of the very lightest colour that we had, which was 0, 0, 0. I'm getting a bit confused there because I've taken all the caps off. And now this is just going to do a final run through for all of these colours. And in fact, I'm going to put this colour right across the entire picture because this is the lightest. And we can even run this over the front of the nose. We can run this all through and just colour all those areas now. And now I'm going to put some rounded shapes on her face here because the face is rounded in certain areas. So if you look at the planes of her face, it's not flat, it's rounded. And when I do my skin colour, I like to actually work with the planes of the face rather than against it. You can see this is going to curve, so my stroke is curving. Now the nostril is definitely curved around the top of the nostril, so that's going to curve there. That gives a little bit more dimension to the picture too. And I'm just making sure that I've got these curves running through my picture. Keep blending on these edges here, which are darker, so that you don't have a line there, you actually have a blended shadow. It's all about going back in and making sure that you get a blended look rather than a streaky look or rather than a patchy look. Now I'm going to give that a moment to dry because it can be, I'll just finish that eyepiece there. It can be quite tempting to just keep going and keep going and keep going till you reach the point of no return. And that can be quite frustrating. I'm going to add her eye simply because it looks a bit odd not having any colour there. And I'm going to give her BG11 and BG15 on the eye. Now the coloured part of this eye is really tiny, so honestly it doesn't give you much of an opportunity to colour, but the darker colour will just be under the eyelid, which is where you'll find the shadow casts anyway, maybe at the bottom like that. So she's got a bit of colour there, so now her eye is looking somewhat less scary. And then I'm bringing in the pinks for the lips. The lip colours that I have are RV13, RV20 and RV21. So we'll start with the lightest, which is RV13. I'm going to colour them as though she has lipstick on, so I'm not going to start with a really light base coat. So there's our RV13, RV20, so darker towards the inside and underneath, and darker towards the underneath and back into the inside area here, and just a little bit on the top. And then RV21 for the darker. And I think I probably need something just a little bit darker in there as well. I'm going to come back in with the lightest and just blend that back a little bit. I'm thinking I want something slightly darker in there. That's the one I want. So this is R24. And I'm just going to put that right in the corners, blend it around underneath and into the corner, slightly on the top. And now I'm going, that actually gives beautiful definition, and now I'm going to bring RV21, blend that, beautiful, and then come back in with the R20, and cover the whole thing. So you can see I have some dimension and some shading there. The other thing I want to do now is come in and shade her eyelid, which I can see just by looking at how this is drying. I want that to be darker, so I'm going to pick out my darkest colour, which was E34, and I'm going to put some dark colour in the corner. And, oh, I've got some in the eye. No. Okay, Colorless Blender to the rescue. A little tip I find is always best for lifting the colour out with your Colorless Blender. So I'm just going to push that back over the line. And that's already taken some colour out, but I'm going to let it dry, come back and have another go at it just to make sure that it's all come out. The other thing I want to put now is my blush. Now I'm going to put some blush on the side of the eyelid because there is a bit of pink around your eyes. I'm just going to work with these two colours, R20 and RV21. So they'll be my two colours for the blush. So I'm starting with the lightest, R20, and I'm going to start on the eyelid at the side. Bring that little bit of pink in, and already that's given the eye a lift. Painless plastic surgery and eye lift. Okay, there we go, and I'll just blend it back again, just on the eyelid there. Just gives a little bit of colour, a little bit of dimension, makes the eyelid slightly heavier. And I'm also going to bring in a touch of R20, now coming into the cheeks. Now, the blush is quite subtle, and to get, I want to leave this quite light here, but I want to bring some blush around the hairline. If you think about makeup, if you're putting makeup on, where would you put your makeup? You would put your blush right up into the hairline, come down over the cheeks, and you probably have it going around several areas of the face. It's, if you're having one of those days where your skin looks really pasty and you put a little bit of blush up near your hairline, that can look really healthy. So those of you who wear makeup, this is a really helpful tip. So I'm just going to just blend it in. Once I've done this, back with my skin tones, but I just want the slightly darker one right near the hairline, just there. Just a small amount of the RV21 right near the hairline, just to intensify that. Okay, now that's looking exactly where I want it to be. I might actually just draw it out slightly more in this area here. And you can see I'm using that flicking motion again. And now coming back in with my skin tones. So I'm going to come in with E00. Again, using the flicking motion to blend with the flicks that I've already created. And then blending it out again using that circular motion around the cheek. So she's got a curve in her face. It's not just straight angles, it's curved angles as well. I'm just going to keep working this until it feels done. She's got quite a rosy little apple there, so I'm going to bring in E00. I'm actually going to add some colour here because it's a little pale. I'm just going to keep doing a circular motion there to make that a rounded section on her cheek. Just colouring in the chin a little bit more. And she's almost done. So I'm going to wait for that to dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back in with the very darkest right near the roots and inside the ear. So the very darkest colour that I was using was E34, and I'm just going to pop that inside those very dark areas that have been coloured by the artist already. The eyebrow, So now she's actually got a coloured eyebrow, which is good. I didn't want the eyebrow to look like it was just a grey ink colour. And right inside the nostril. And under the chin behind the ear. So there's very, very dark colours, and now I'm just going to blend those out with a lighter tone. So feather into the edges so that it's not quite so stark. And I think we're done. That looks pretty good to me. Okay. I think we are finished. Maybe just a little bit more of this into the eyebrow. And again, it's just like putting makeup on. It's just how you would put eyebrow pencil. You apply it the same way. And she's finished. So her hair's going to be mid-brown colour, so the eyebrow is going to tone in with the hair colour.